Welcome, you guys. We are so excited to have you here. We have somebody very, very special. We've actually been watching Fran. Her name is Fran Moore. We've been watching her for a little while and are very, very impressed with what she is doing. So we really wanted to bring her on so that you guys could learn from her. You could get to know her a little bit. We'll kind of help you know where you can go to check her out. She is the CEO of the Pod Factory, where they manage everything about podcasting. So if you are wanting to learn about that, she's going to give us some of her tips and tricks and secrets today. And Fran, we're going to have, after I kind of finish introducing you, I'm going to want you to share with them how you fell in love with this, like how you got involved. Okay. But from the time Fran started implementing and testing dozens and dozens of strategies to figure out what works best when you're launching your podcast, when you're scaling your podcast. And she is literally she is a self-professed obsessed. Hey, that kind of rhymes. She's self-professed obsessed. Say that 3 times fast. But she loves helping people with their podcasts. She loves producing epic podcast episodes, helping get the content in front of the target audience. She is really good at this. And so in like I saw a quote that you had said, Fran, you said, starting this business and supporting other business owners has been the biggest blessing in my life. Since I was young, I've always craved the financial freedom I didn't have growing up. And I knew the way to build wealth was not through working for someone else at a 9 to 5, but through creating my own path. You guys, cheers out there. Put stuff in the comments if that is so you. So there's something people call you a hype woman. So I want to know what that means. We'll talk about that today as well. But outside of business, she's a wife. She's a reality TV fan. So it's kind of fun to get to know a little bit about that. She is aspiring to be a housewife of the online business world. She loves comic books, cartoons that have a style inspired by, call it out there, Fran.
My style is inspired by Doug Funny.
By Doug, yeah. So she's a fan of rap music, anything that her husband Ron plays, which she says, by the way, can also be music for your podcast. So that's a perfect combo. So before we're done today, or when, as we post this, we're going to make sure that we have information that lets you guys know where you can find all the information about any of this. But so Fran, what are some other things that you love that we missed let them get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, so I think you hit everything other than the fact that I am almost 6 months pregnant right now. Um, but everything else, yes, that's
That's
exactly me.
awesome. So congratulations. What's the due date?
The due date is July 19th, and it's a little boy.
Oh boy, do you have a name?
We do. So my husband is actually a junior. So by default, he already had a name. He's going to be the
Okay.
third, Ronald Lee Moore the third.
Okay. Perfect. That's awesome. Okay. So tell us why you fell in love with this. What made you
So
find this?
yeah, so I started my podcast in 2018, the end of 2018, and I talked all about my journey to like paying off debt and buying our first house together. And I even talked about the fact that we canceled our wedding like 5 months before it was supposed to happen just to save money. We did the numbers and I was just like, oh, you know what? I actually prefer to have $20,000 instead of spending $20,000. So that's how I started podcasting. And I realized I was good at it. Like I was good at creating content, I was good at talking every week. And I was just like, why isn't this my business? Because I was trying so hard to make so many other things my business. And it was literally like God saying, like, dude, I just gave you the skills to make a business. Use those skills. So I started just managing 1 or 2 podcasts here and there. And then slowly over the course of a couple of years, we're now at 40 clients in my agency
What?
and
And
10
now you
team
have an
members.
agency.
Yeah, and 10 team members of just people loving to support podcasters and helping women and men grow their business through a podcast.
That is so cool. So how did you discover, you were doing your podcast when you got your first couple of clients, did people come to you and say, "Hey, how are you doing this? How did that happen? Did you try to get clients or did they just come to you?
So my claim to fame was gonna be like being people's account manager, like online, because I came from account management, which was
Oh,
silly. Like it's
interesting.
impossible to be more than like two people's account manager at a time. So I took on this client, like we had a discovery call, and she's just like, "Do you know anything about podcasts?" And I was like, "Yeah, I run a podcast. I have like 300 listeners." And she was like, "That's crazy. People don't get 300 listeners on podcasts from like not promoting because it was just all word of mouth."
Oh,
And so I was like,
wow.
"Okay, cool." So I took on her podcast and I still have her. I've had her for 2 years now. And she just started telling her friends. So it just kind of became a referral network. And then she was like, "You should just make podcasting your thing. Honestly, you do it very well and it's seamless and I don't have to stress about my show." So I was just like, "Okay, I'm just going to run with it and try it
That
out."
is interesting. And what you know what? That's very telltale, Fran, because the fact that you didn't advertise, people hear about you. But the fact that your clients continue to spread the word, that says something about you and about the trust they have for you and about what you do for them. Why do you think they are inspired to feel that way? You know what you're good at, like really. Just be honest.
Yeah. So my personality is introverted, but when I let you in, it feels so like I guess, intimate. So my clients know I care about them. Even
Wow.
though we're at 40 clients now, they all still know that they can like reach out to me and still get Fran if they need Fran. And they know that I will create that same feeling for the rest of everyone on my team. But it's like, it's communication more than anything. If you watch the online space, there are a lot of people who are like trying so hard to get away from corporate America, but what we don't remember is that corporate America did a great job in teaching us how to communicate with clients and how to like meet other people's expectations and do deliverables and time management. So I just transferred those skills. I didn't become an entrepreneur and say like everything I learned over there is out the window. I
Yeah.
just used those same skills, those same people skills I learned as an account manager, and I just did the same thing here. So I was like, why don't I just become like the Chick-fil-A of podcasting and just be so good at it that people can't say no to like the customer service part of it.
They're like, I have to come. I need Fran. So how do you
Exactly.
handle having you have 40 clients and you are helping them feel like they can talk to you anytime they need? That scares me because with my business, you know how it gets to the point where you're in demand and then it's almost like it can suck your life. It can suck all your energy, even though you love your clients. How have you balanced that?
So
How do
I had to quickly realize that I can't be an editor anymore. As much as I love editing podcasts, there was no way for me to actually be available and be the face of my company and also do tasks. So immediately I started to give out the task of actually editing the podcast.
Mhm.
Then we hired account managers and I taught them how to like communicate with our clients. So they do a lot of the day-to-day communication. So when
Mhm.
clients reach out to me, it's more of like there's an issue or it's more of just like I want to talk to Fran and I want to let you know you guys are doing a great job. So it's less of like reaching out to me for like immediate action and
Right.
more of just like high level overview. So I kind of like built a business where there is a chain of command and my clients understand the chain of
Well,
command and my team does too.
okay. And so it seems like you're a pretty mellow personality. Are you
Yeah.
always mellow or do you get intense? How are you
No,
with your
I'm
yeah.
I'm pretty mellow and chill. It scares some people. I know one time, and this is also how I get clients. I know one time a client was just like, "Oh my God, my podcast is not on Apple." And she was just like freaking out and crying and like
Oh,
disaster, right? And so we launched her podcast and she calls me and I was just like, okay, there's probably a simple answer to this. So I log into iTunes and I'm like, okay, I see it on iTunes on my end. Do you have the latest version of iTunes? And she had to update her phone. And she was like, "Oh my god, there it is. It's right there. I just didn't have the latest version." And so I realized like if I am not level-headed, this could easily become like a traumatic experience being a CEO because people are constantly like coming to me with fires. If I can't just be even kill, it's not going to work out. There
Yeah,
are things in life in general that can make me be more like up and down and less mellow, but I try to stay pretty even keel in my business for the most part.
that's cool. Okay, so now I know what some of the listeners are thinking. Some of the listeners who are way more intense are thinking, well, yeah, but that comes naturally to you. But I just want to call this out right now if you're thinking that, because even people who are naturally a little more like even keeled, there are still times that are stressful and frustrating, and they have to make that choice over and over again. So I don't want to invalidate the fact that you have chosen to be this way as well.
Yeah.
So what do you do in those moments? Just because maybe that does come more naturally to you, you still have to work at it and make a choice. Tell us what that looks like and things you've learned about that that maybe will help the listeners who struggle with that.
Yeah, so I am what people call their silent strong friend. When Instagram says check on your strong friends, I'm the person that half my friends are texting and they're just like, "Hey, you doing all right?" So like I do internalize a lot of things, but what I've done to stop doing that is like I just kind of journal about a lot of it. Like I write out like how it made me feel, how I reacted, and how I can react differently the next time. So I used to when I was really young, 22 in corporate America, I used to cry when things would go wrong at work, like
Yeah.
immediately. Like if my manager would be like, well, Fran, this actually went wrong because you didn't code this correctly, blah, blah, blah. And I would just like immediately cry, like after walking away from my manager. And I eventually learned to stop taking feedback so personally and realize that all feedback is good feedback because you can grow from it. Whether it's someone saying your company is amazing or someone saying, like, I hate working with you because your communication sucks. At that point, it gives me a chance to reflect on what happened. Like, why weren't we communicating with you properly? What were you expecting? Did we set the right boundaries and things of that nature? So when I stop thinking about it as a personal attack on Fran, the human, and more so just feedback on the work that was done, that's how I'm able to stay kind of like middle of the road when it comes to like clients freaking out and panicking.
Cool. That's really cool. And I want you to notice something that you said that something that she said, you guys, that you may or may not have picked up. And it was when you were talking about writing in your journal that you said, and I wrote this down because I thought it was powerful. You said, I write down what I feel. So you don't just avoid the feelings. You write down what you feel.
Yeah.
Then you write down what went wrong. And so you're starting already to prepare to like figure out what we can do to change it. And then what can I change? So there were three steps there. Write down what you feel, what went wrong, and what can I change? And that's a powerful step-by-step process that actually will help somebody become better at this like you are. So that's really cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's all about shifting that perspective. That's all that I had to do to stop myself from crying at every incident.
Yes, I know. Okay. Okay. I'm going to pause for just a second. I don't know why mine is all blurry, but we're not. I'm
Mhm.
going to do this because I have to like get close so that it will let me do this so that it won't be blurry. And I'll just have them, they'll edit that, of course. So that it, because I always worry if it's distracting to people. Like, oh, when are they going to fix the blur? Okay. That's good. Okay. Then we'll continue from here. Okay. One of the things I love to ask people on our show is what are the rules that you broke? We're the rule breakers. We're into high speed systems, step skipping strategies. Don't we don't do things the way other people have always done them. And you obviously didn't. You started a podcast when you had experience in something else. And so what I like to find out are what are the rules that you broke? The things where inside you're like, I am not doing it the way everyone else does it. Like, how am I doing this?
Yeah. So I broke the rules a lot when it came to the virtual assistant world. When I was a virtual assistant, I just would try things out and then be like, I hate this. I'm not doing it. And I wouldn't linger in it. Like I have so many friends who are stuck in a business they built 3 years ago and they don't know how to get away from it or pivot. And I said, I don't want that. So in my first 6 months of being online, I was just kind of like, I really don't like email management. I don't understand why people are so chaotic in their email inboxes. And I didn't love the idea of managing other people's teams. I love my team and I understand them, but I couldn't understand how to just step into someone's business and say like you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And I just was not good at being a manager. And so I was like, I'm just really good at creating a process around one certain thing. So I was like, what's the one thing that I can create a process for over and over again that's repeatable, scalable? And so I said, okay, the one thing I do well every single time that people hands down always pick me for is podcasting. So I just dropped everything else I was doing in my business. I found my old clients, new VAs, and a lot of people are like, well, that was pretty rash. What about your like financial situation? I was like, I had a whole phasing plan on what to do to make sure we were fine financially, but it freaks people out when I tell them I went from being a VA to just owning a podcast agency in like a matter of 6 months, because they're like, that's such a fast pivot. And I'm like, really? I didn't want to spend time doing what I didn't love like I did in corporate America. I didn't want to waste another 5 years of my life complaining. So
That is
I was like,
awesome.
let's fix this.
You are so my people. It's like, I don't care what anyone else says. This is what we need to do because it's what was going to work for you. And so how did you narrow it down? Because I'm telling you right now, and you have so many clients and you've seen what it's like. They have all their babies, all their little business ideas, all their little things that they want to do. We all have all of our little babies. And for somebody to say, oh my goodness, you can't do that, or you got to cut that one out. It's like, wow, you're killing my baby. So number one, how did you help? Tell us anything you can that will help the listeners who are struggling with staying focused on one thing. What did you do that might help them? And how do you do it with your clients?
So I basically write a list of every great idea. Entrepreneurs, we all swear we have like 10,000 great ideas, right?
Oh, that
So
are
I write
all
a
going to be
list.
$1 million ideas.
Right. This one is for sure the billion. But I write all of my ideas out and I let them live on a list, and I revisit that list whenever I'm just like, I have capacity and space to start the next venture. Right. So I only knock out one thing at a time. The list allows my brain to stop thinking about it. So I know the idea is somewhere for me to go back and reference. And it's not like I have to just lay awake at night and be like, wow, I wonder if that like cat cafe would really work out, right? I don't have to think about it. The cat cafe is on a list somewhere. And if I want to revisit that one day, if it's actually logical, then I can go back and do that. And so that was one way to stop my brain from constantly making up new businesses. Anytime I have a new idea, I just write it down and move forward.
I love
Because
that.
I think it's all of our natural inclination as entrepreneurs is to just keep coming
Oh,
up with new crap.
right. Because there's so many problems that we can solve, and we know that
Right.
we're the answer. And so, since you talked about, then I can sleep at night because I don't have to worry about my list. So, I'm just going to kind of interject this thing that one thing I've noticed for entrepreneurs, and maybe some of you have already tried this, but if you will do a list like she is saying, then what will happen is when you need to sleep, you're not worried about forgetting the things. You've got it on the list. And I found that a lot of the clients I work with end up sleeping better when they have a list. So that's really good
Yeah.
advice. Okay, so when you were starting your company, Fran, I want to know what helped you push through the hard stuff. What were the hard things and what helped you get past those?
I allow myself to say I want to quit. A lot of people are like, "That's so ungrateful, Fran, to say you want to quit a business where you made 6 figures." And I'm like, but I allow myself to have those days to say like, "This
I
is
love
hard," and I allow myself to say like, I don't know if I can do this. And I allow myself to say this, even though people are like, you're just speaking negative things into the atmosphere. But what happens when I say it out loud to my husband is he'll go back down memory lane with me and be like, hey, remember when you got your first client and you made your first $1,000 and you lost your mind? And he was like, and you remember when you started this podcast and nobody knew your name? And you remember when you grew your Instagram account to 3,000 people in 3 months just because you wanted to see what happens? And so like he reminds me of all these crazy things I've done. And I have like this thing that me and my friends call a win wall. So anytime I say those things out loud, I say, okay, you got to go look at your win wall. Like, what are some things that you wrote down that you thought were impossible the last time you said you wanted to quit?
I
And
love
so
it.
a
A
lot of
win
times
wall.
I
That's
will look at
cool.
that. Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
look at that and I'll just be kind of like, okay, Fran, you've been here before. It's just a new mountain. Let's figure this one out.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because somebody climbs Mount Everest, they're not done. They want to now go do Kilimanjaro.
Right, exactly. Or they want to top their last time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so if you could give people advice, what would you say are the three? Because you've worked with all these clients who do these podcasts, and I know what it's like. You go in, you start working with a client, you're like, oh, okay, here's the problem. Or no, 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 we're gonna do this. What are the three biggest mistakes that you see people making with their podcast when they're trying to make a go of it?
The number one is having too many guests on their show because now you've given all your authority over to someone else and everyone's coming to your show just to figure out who they can go to next. So a lot of people will have all of these guest episodes and they're trying to do what Oprah does, but Oprah made a name for herself before she started having a whole bunch of guests on her show. We knew who she was. So you need to establish yourself as a leader in your industry before like bringing everyone else's opinion in. So try not to have as many guests. Like try to mix it up, maybe do 2 solos a month and then 2 guests. Or if you can do 3 solos and 1 guest, that's actually the best combination to make
Wait,
people
wait, say
listen
that
to
again.
you.
So three solos and one guest. So for every three episodes you do that you teach something, then the
Mhm.
fourth one would be an interview of some sort. Oh, that's great.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
great.
That keeps all of the like power in your hand and people are still looking to you as the leader versus like if you just constantly bring on guests, they're thinking like is she the leader or is she just bringing on other leaders that I should go follow?
Mhm.
Um, so think about that. And then the second thing people do is they buy the microphone that everyone and their mom has, the Blue Yeti,
Uh,
and they try to sit in like an open space, and it sounds like it's okay. They did a really good job with their marketing, Blue Yeti. They bought like every famous podcaster in and told everyone to buy them. But what
yeah,
happens with those mics, the audio, like just the audio on its own, it's always grainy. And so you look to a producer to actually fix that, but it's not easy to fix terrible raw audio. So a
yeah,
lot of times I tell people to go with a dynamic mic and make sure that they're not actually using just the USB to laptop mic. If you're like only doing audio, if you're doing video, the Yeti works.
yeah.
But if you're doing only audio, the Yeti picks up a lot of background noise.
Interesting. Okay, so
If
what
you're not
about you? You said the dynamic, is that the brand? Tell us a little more so people, because I know right now people are gonna be going, which one? So,
so a dynamic mic is just a type of mic. So what I'm using is a dynamic mic, but this is called a Rode Procaster. You usually see these in like radio studios, like for people who do morning shows. That's where you usually see these. But because they sit in that open space together, this mic is dynamic and it only focuses on my voice and whatever's right in front
oh,
of it
that's awesome.
instead of trying to pick up everything around it. The other one I think is called a cardi. I can't ever remember. My husband is a sound engineer and he always
Oh,
tells me the name of the other one, but it's it's like a cardiac. No, that's a heart. It's like a cardio or something like that.
yeah,
And
like a heart attack.
but it's basically the mic that singers use. Like if you're at a church and a singer has a mic and they want to be further away, but you can still hear them, that's what they use. So we
Oh,
want more
okay.
of a dynamic mic. And then the last thing I see people do wrong is not structure their content around their business. So if you started a podcast and you have a business and you just talk about like I don't know, Mary and her lamb and it has nothing to do with the launch that's coming up in 3 weeks, you're not prepping your audience to actually buy from you. A lot of us want our podcast to become like this great place where we do ads and have all these affiliates and we're like the next Jenna Kutcher or Marie Folio. And really, what we need to be doing is using our business and our podcast as a funnel to our business instead of dreaming of the day when we hit 10K downloads per episode.
Right, right. Okay, so I know there's still going to be people clamoring for what mic. So can I get you to send us the links for
Yeah.
the microphones that you would suggest? Maybe a low end one, a medium, and a high end, because we have listeners who they're millionaires and they can buy whatever they want. There are people who are right in the middle somewhere, and then we have people who are just starting their business. So that would be
Yeah.
super helpful. We'll put that with the links that are, we'll combine those with the ones where you can find Fran and see what she's up to. And also make sure we have the link for your husband. So people who want some of that audio that he creates, that would be cool. Okay.
For sure.
So my question, I want to ask you about your passion. How did you stay true to your passion when you had to deal with all the red tape? And dealing with the people as you grow your business is one of the most fun things, but it can also be one of the worst things as you're dealing with hard things that happen. So how did you keep your passion? We talked a little bit about that because you were talking about how, when you're having a hard time and you're going, I just want to quit. But how did you keep your passion? So on the other side of that, how did you talked through it with your husband, but what did that look like for you?
So for me, my passion has always been less about like actual podcasting. As obsessed as I am with analytics, podcasting was just naturally where I belong because you can slice and dice the analytics of podcasting all day long. But my passion was always to like break generational curses, as a lot of like African American people will refer to it as. It's just like that feeling of always being trapped in the same cycle of like your parents were always in debt, your grandparents were always in debt, and you're always like one paycheck away from like not having everything you need. And so
Yeah.
I said, I don't want that for my kids, and I want to give them a way out. Like I want them to have access to the opportunity to say like, hey, I don't want to go to college, but I still want to be a millionaire. So I just wanted to give them that chance that I didn't have, to step in and say like, oh, maybe I'll just go run my mom's business, or maybe I'll do this, or my mom can help me start my own business if I want. So I wanted to be able to give them access that I didn't have even before they exist. So that's what keeps me going. That's what my passion is to be like, I don't want you to have to get into as much debt as I had to get into to go to college and work at a corporate job and still not even do anything that's related to what I got a degree in. So I didn't want them to have to live in that rat race. And I said, how can I get more people out of this and my children out of this?
Fran, that is literally beautiful, beautiful. No wonder you don't lose your passion. It's because you know your why. That is beautiful. And so thank you for sharing that. And
You're
that
welcome.
just makes me wonder about, so there's a big topic right now, and I think this relates to business. A lot of people act like, no, it's politics, but I think it relates to business. And, there's the whole drama going on right now about Black Lives Matter. And I have so many African friends who are saying, I want to be called Black. I don't want to be called African American. I don't, and so everybody has their different views. And then I have my friends who are in the African community or the Black community saying, well, Black Lives Matter isn't even about us. And how, like, someone who is not that race, I don't really see color. I remember one time, one of my most proud moments is I have a friend who is Black, and someone was asking me about him and they were trying to figure out which person it was who had been at the event. And I was trying to describe him. And then they saw him and they said, oh, so he's like African. I'm like, oh yeah. Like I didn't even think to describe it that way. And I thought I liked that because I just know people all around the world and we're all just people. But I'm white, I'm part Mexican, I'm part Greek, I have all different kinds of background, but I want to care about that. I want to be sensitive. It matters to me. But I also, I'm part American Indian. People are like, oh, don't say American Indian. I'm like, no, I am proud to be American Indian. I can call myself whatever I want. Like there's this whole thing. How do we navigate that? And what are your thoughts and opinions on that in business? And what advice would you give to people who are white or in maybe races that are not that maybe sometimes haven't had hard backgrounds, or like my religion, the religion I'm in had a horrible background and we were oppressed. But I don't know, how do you manage that without, like, I think politically correct has almost turned into we can't even just accept each other the way we are. We have to be offended all the time. So tell me your thoughts.
So for me, I have a degree in history and sociology. So for me, color blindness, I don't enjoy the term because when you see me, I'm brown, like
You're
immediately.
like, duh,
And
I
that's
wish I
that's
had your skin. Okay. I'm always trying to get a tan.
right.
Like I noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like seeing our color doesn't devalue us,
Yeah, it's what
but
makes it
also,
beautiful.
yeah, right, but also acknowledging it lifts us up, because again, people are like, why do we always celebrate the first Black person to do something? The fact that I am 28 years old and there's still first happening post, what are we at now? Like, we're about 115 years past slavery,
Yeah.
and there's still first generation Black people doing something new.
Wow, that
We
gives me
celebrate it,
chills.
right?
That
We have to celebrate it. And so
yes.
like when other people are offended by the celebration, that's where it becomes like this weird issue of like, I don't personally understand why people are offended. Like when I got so excited about Kamala Harris, if even if it would have been Candace Owens, I
Right.
would have been excited, right?
Yeah.
Because that
Like,
hasn't been
dude, you did
seen.
this. That is cool.
Right. Right. Even as women, like when we see the first woman doing something
Yeah.
else, or we see, it's a means to celebrate. It's not to make anyone else feel like you don't matter. It's to let you know, like, look how far we've come. Like, oh my God, there's a Black woman who gets to call herself the vice president now. Right. And imagine even just 20 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. And so it's just like appreciating the struggle that the Black American community has gone through and celebrating how far we all have come
And
together.
acknowledging that it was
Yeah.
real and that it has affected a lot of people. Yeah, so
Right. So
really
like
it's
I've
about not being offended and just loving well, everyone talks about love, but what does that mean really? Don't get offended and be excited for each other.
exactly. So like if I bring up, I think once during last month during February, I was just kind of telling people about a lot of Black podcasters that do the same thing as their white counterparts, but they don't get the like same kind of accolades. They don't get the same like following or audience. And I just talked about them and I was just like, hey, this is like a really good show to listen to if you really enjoy Dave Ramsey. This is a Black woman who's talking about finances, or a Black man who's
Oh,
talking about finances, right? Just to get a different perspective. And people were just like, well, why do you have to point that out? Why don't you just leave this country if you want us to like
oh my
for you.
goodness.
Right,
You
right, right,
have
right. So
responses like that?
all the
I guess
time, all the time.
honestly, I guess I get them too. I get them too, but they're just about stuff that's just as dumb.
Yeah, so all
Oh
the time
my
I get things like,
God.
"Well, why don't you go live in Africa?" or things like that. I'm not from Africa.
You're like, I never
Right.
was. You're like, where are
Like,
you coming from?
I'm not even sure where my family is from originally. Like, you can't trace us anymore. Like, there's a
Oh,
point in like
really?
1903 where you can't figure out like which plantation someone's great great grandfather came from, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So like that kind of stuff people don't understand. Like it's an honor and a privilege to trace your heritage, right?
Oh, it's
Most Black Americans
beautiful.
don't have that honor or privilege to do it. So we
Yeah,
celebrate things that we've never seen because we're just like, okay, this is us building that heritage that we've been longing for. And
yeah.
so that's all we're asking. We're just like join in on the celebration. It doesn't
That's
downgrade any or devalue anyone else's opinions or accomplishments. All it's saying is like, can you also be excited for us?
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that is a good perspective. So thanks for sharing that because I know a lot of times
Yeah.
people are like afraid to talk about it or whatever. I'll do my presentations when I'm doing going from stage or whatever. And I'll just say, just know I love people. I am not worried about being politically correct. I'm worried about being kind, but I am not worried about being politically correct. So I love that. I love that perspective. That was awesome. So you have grown a huge business. I mean, you are doing extremely well. You're in the top 5% of income earners in the world. You literally
I
are.
know. That's
And
crazy,
that
right?
is crazy. And so, number one, kudos to you for doing that. And one of the things I love is I know once in a while I hear people act like the rags to riches stories, like Tony Robbins has one, Russell Brunson has one, um, Steve Jobs has, well, everybody has, not everybody, but a lot of people have that. And to me, they're inspiring. I think it's so inspiring. And I know growing up in a tough situation where we didn't have very much, I know a lot of those experiences is what helped give me some strength that I relied on later. And so I can feel that in you. And I think that's really cool. And so how do you, now that you do so well with your business, I want to know, how do you make sure, because, okay, first let me establish this. Would you agree that the thing, because you're nodding your head, the people who can't see don't know that, but you're nodding your head, that the hard things you go through and not having a lot gives you strength and you grow through that. So would you agree with that first of all? Okay, so I just want to make sure that
Of
I'm like
course.
not just
Yeah.
assuming. So how, obviously we want that for our kids. And now your daughter is growing up rich basically. So how do you make sure that as you find success financially, that our kids are learning the same lessons, because they still need to learn the same lessons to make them powerful, but there are different ways to learn them. So what are things you do to make sure that you're not raising a child who is so soft that they can't handle hard things?
Yeah, so number one, me my husband's family is interesting. So it is, I think it might be a cultural thing too with black Americans, but a lot of times like we do this thing called joning one another, and it's just like poking fun. Like, and it helps you stay grounded and humble. Like, I can go over here and talk about making 50K in 2 months um, on a podcast, and then go to my family's house and they can be like, Fran, you still can't parallel park, can you? And it's so true. I cannot parallel park to save me. But a lot of it, I read this quote that was just like, we can teach our kids without passing down our trauma. So, like, I can teach them the things that I've gone through and reiterate like what has happened without sheltering them from like the fact that this used to be my life, and I haven't mom hasn't always had like a place to call home, and mom hasn't always had this and what it feels like, and then just taking them to visit other kids who don't have as much as them and teaching them how to give to others. I think sometimes we just do like mission trips, which is cool or whatever, but we're not actually showing people like what goes on after you leave that mission trip, like
Yeah,
how you are like leaving this area with like, okay, you built this building, but they can't afford lights, they can't afford running water in this building that you built for them, and all of these different things, or even just looking at the people in your own community that need help and teaching your kids like how to like reach out to others and help them and give without wanting anything back, and understanding that gifts aren't meant to be a barter, to say like, if I give you something, then make sure you also give me something for Christmas. Like teaching them to give with a free heart, I think will help them out a lot. But it'll be trial and error for the most part. And I've come to terms with that, of like just learning how to keep them aware of what other people go through, even though they might not have to see it ever.
that's cool. So can you give us an example of like an experience you helped her have, or something you guys did where she got to experience that? Because I think people would love to have ideas of, what can I do? What are some ways I can do that?
Yeah, so I don't have a baby yet. This is my first baby
Oh, that's
right
right.
now.
I keep acting
Yeah,
like you already have.
but I have nieces and nephews. My siblings are like 10 years older than me. So I have a niece who is 14. And whenever she comes to town, I take her to like the soup kitchens around, and we just kind of like hang out and we pass out food. And she is always complaining about what lunch table to sit out, because she really wants to decide like what group of kids she wants to surround herself with, right? And so
Right.
then when we do these types of things, she realizes like, wow, they don't even know if they're going to have lunch. And I'm like, exactly. So while
Oh,
you're complaining about who to sit with, like what group of friends you want, someone is just trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from. So, like,
that
I
is
noticed
so
those connections helped her a lot.
cool. That is really cool. And how many people do that with their niece? Really? I mean, people do that with their own kids, but that's really cool that you're reaching out and doing that. So, well, what final advice would you leave with people if you had one last thing to tell them about their podcast? What would you teach them? What would you, how would you inspire them? What would you tell them?
Don't try to plan too much. Just go with it. Like if
I
you
love
woke
that.
up, if if you woke up and said, I need a podcast, go get one.
That's awesome. Don't make it complicated.
Mm-mm.
That's awesome. Okay, Fran, thank you so much. We are so excited that you came on. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us, and good luck with your baby. And so are you going to take some time
Thank
off of
you.
your podcast when you have your baby? What are you going to do? Are you going to share the
I
experience?
actually I actually have some friends who will host as me while I'm gone.
Okay, good, good. Wow, you're getting famous. You need people to step in. That is awesome. Well, it's exciting to have somebody so famous on our
I
show.
can't.
So thank you, Fran. We appreciate your time. That's been really fun.